Thursday, August 29th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. With all the talk about the Federal Reserve, the op-ed written by Bill Dudley, the former president of the New York Fed, telling the Fed to actually scupper Donald Trump's trade war to make sure that he loses the election. There's a lot of talk about Bill Dudley and the Federal Reserve. There's an article here on Zero Hedge. Senator calls for probe into Fed independence after Bill Dudley urges Fed to overthrow Trump. So today I want to go over the origins of the Federal Reserve, which are basically controlled by the private bankers, the same people who control the globalist movement. And I think, in my opinion, the best book for that is The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins. And I'll go over a section where he talks about who's really behind the Federal Reserve. And I'll go over very briefly this book here, which I read many, many years ago, The House of Morgan by Ron Chernow. Very thick book. I read this book over 25 years ago, the whole thing. And it kind of confirms what this book says. Very interesting. Before that, of course, I'll have a look at what the markets are doing. And I'd like to also thank all the new subscribers, all the existing subscribers. We've reached over 25,000 subscribers, over 5 million views. And I really appreciate all the interaction, all the contributions through Patreon, through PayPal, through other kinds of donations like through cryptocurrencies, through buying merchandise in the Maneco 64 Teespring store. It helps keep the channel going. For today, I guess, I recommend the End the Fed mug that I have in the Teespring store. It says, "Robbing Americans since 1913, End the Fed," at Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. It's one of the most popular ones. There's also Billy mugs, Billy t-shirts, and the Fed t-shirts, all kinds of stuff. So the markets, it's at 8:09 London time, 8:09 a.m. of course. We've got spot gold, 1546.50. That's up just over $7. The high's been 1550. The low's been 1537.60. So gold's trading up fairly well here. Silver continuing to roar ahead, outperforming gold again. Silver's up 1.3%. Gold is up 0.5%. We're at 1858, up 23 cents. Range has been 1830 to 1866. It's not going to be smooth sailing for precious metals higher. It's going to be very volatile, but they're looking good still. The Dow futures up 30 points or 0.13%, 26,059. S&P up 4.1%, 2890. The NASDAQ 100 future up 8 points or 0.1%. So stock market moving a little higher. Yesterday, interesting day. The stock market was down most of the morning here in London and early afternoon. And then when the US markets opened officially at 9:30 New York time, the stock market just zoomed up all day. Very, very strange. You make up your mind who did that, right? The initials ESF and PPT come to mind, right? But anyway, let's continue here. The currencies, sterling is down 0.18%, 121.90. So the big news in the UK is that Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going to shut Parliament for about 4 to 5 weeks after September 13th to try to scupper the opposition in Parliament to leaving the EU without a deal. So that's why we're seeing a little bit of weakness in the pound, and that's the the Brexit thing is dividing the country even more. I would say that it's a big distraction. Of course, it is a big distraction, but the biggest problem for the country is economic. We have insurmountable debts. Interest rates here are plunging as well. The currency is melting down, not only against the dollar, but particularly against gold, which is the currency of kings, right? Which is the ultimate measure of value. So anyway, euro 110.80 unchanged. The euro is very steady lately. Dollar down 0.1% against the yen, just below 106, 105.98. The dollar unchanged against the yuan, 716.90. WTI crude unchanged, 55.60. Brent 59.70. Bond markets are continuing to show signs that investors are losing confidence in the central banks and in the fact that the economies are slowing down. They're losing faith and confidence that central banks are creating the right conditions for growth and for the payment of debts. And that's a bad thing. This means that markets expect the central banks to print more money, create more debt, keep rates low, print money, QE, all the 9 yards, right? So the 10-year note is unchanged this morning, 147.60. The 2 years at 150.60. So inverted there by 3 basis points. And if you look at European yields, they dropped a lot yesterday as well. The German 10-year yield is minus 70 now. So things are not looking great. Bond markets are pointing to trouble ahead still. So back to the Federal Reserve now. So this article at Zero Hedge says, Senator calls for probe into Fed independence after Bill Dudley urges Fed to overthrow Trump. Anyway, I think the Fed should be abolished. It's not a matter of independence. And there's an interesting quote here from the Zero Hedge article, and I'll go through it. It says, it was only a matter of time before someone called for an official inquiry into the independence of the Federal Reserve, the world's most important central bank. The same one which Bernanke's former advisor, Andrew Levin, said 3 years ago. And this is a quote from Andrew Levin, who advised Bernanke and worked for the Federal Reserve Board for 20 years. And that's his quote. A lot of people would be stunned to know the extent to which the Federal Reserve is privately owned. So let's switch over to this book, The Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins. And I won't go through the whole background of Eustace Mullins because it would take a long time. So I'll go straight to the book in chapter 5, where he talks about the House of Rothschild. There you go, chapter 5. So let's read through this a little bit. The success of the Federal Reserve conspiracy will raise many questions in the minds of readers who are unfamiliar with the history of the United States and finance capital. How could Kuhn-Loeb-Morgan alliance, powerful though it might be, believe that it would be capable, first, of devising a plan which would bring the entire money and credit of the people of the United States into their hands, and second, of getting such a plan enacted into law? The capability of devising and enacting the National Reserve Plan as the immediate result of the Jekyll Island expedition was called. Jekyll Island expedition was in 1910, was easily within the powers of the Kuhn-Loeb-Morgan alliance, according to the following from McClure's magazine, August 1911, The 7 Men by John Moody. So this is what John Moody said. 7 men in Wall Street now control a great share of the fundamental industry and resources of the United States. 3 of the 7 men, J.P. Morgan, James J. Hill, and George F. Baker, head of the First National Bank of New York, belonged to the so-called Morgan Group. Four of them, John D. and William Rockefeller, James Stillman, head of the National City Bank, and Jacob H. Schiff of the private banking firm of Kuhn Loeb Company, and the so-called Standard Oil Citibank Group, the central machine of capital extends its control over the United States. The process is not only economically logical, it is now practically automatic. And now back to what Eustace Mullins says. Thus, we see that the 1910 plot to seize control of the money and credit of the people of the United States was planned by men who already controlled most of the country's resources. It seemed to John Moody practically automatic, and they should continue with their operations. What John Moody did not know or did not tell his readers was that the most powerful men in the United States were themselves answerable to another power, a foreign power, and a power which had been steadfastly seeking to extend its control over the young Republic of the United States since its very inception. This power was the financial power of England, centered in the London branch of the House of Rothschild. The fact was that in 1910, the United States was, for all practical purposes, being ruled from England, and so it is today. The 10 largest bank holding companies in the United States are firmly in the hands of certain banking houses, all of which have branches in London. They are J.P. Morgan Company, Brown Brothers Harriman, Warburg, Kuhn, Loeb, and J. Henry Schroeder. All of them maintain close relationships with the House of Rothschild, principally through the Rothschild control of international money markets through its manipulation of the price of gold. Each day, the world price of gold is set in London, in the London office of N.M. Rothschild and Company. Well, they stopped doing that in 2004, right? I talked about that in the previous video. And it goes on. Well, the thing about the House of Morgan, if most people think, J.P. Morgan is an American bank, but as I told you about the House of Morgan, which I have, if you look at the origin of the House of Morgan here in this book, look where it started. It started out in London. It was only later that they opened up in New York. So, and J.P. Morgan's too huge in London. So actually J.P. Morgan started out through George Peabody, who was an American who moved to London to start his banking house. He continues, although these firms are ostensibly American firms which merely maintain branches in London, the fact is that these banking houses actually take their direction from London. Their history is a fascinating one and unknown to the American public, originating as it did in the international traffic in gold, slaves, diamonds, and other contraband. There are no moral considerations in any business decision made by these firms. They are interested solely in money and power. So there you go. I highly recommend The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. Highly recommend also The House of Morgan, which I read many years ago and I'll probably read again. At the time, I didn't put two and two together and, think, wow, it was London all the time that's controlling the American financial system, and that the Rothschilds are involved. There's a lot of mentions of the Rothschild in this, so I think these two books are really great for people to understand what's going on, and the fact that the Federal Reserve is actually, as Andrew Levin said, and I quote again, a lot of people would be stunned to know the extent to which the Federal Reserve is privately owned. This is a guy who advised Bernanke and worked for the Fed for 20 years, saying this is not conspiracy. Of course, people will call this video conspiracy theory because they don't want to know the truth. That's why the CIA invented that term, so people don't look at the truth, right? And I would say, the Federal Reserve, of course, is the financial arm of the CIA, MI6, same group of globalists, right? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube as well. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.